going, we don't need roads.
When a friend, actually, my buddy Chase is the one that recommended this to me, and he texted me. He said, "Look, dude," he said, "don't Google it. Just watch it. Don't look up anything about it." And now I say the same thing. Whenever I tell someone about it, I say, "Don't read anything about it. Don't Google it. Just sit down and press play." And I feel like that's kind of the best way to go into this thing. So I'm sort of curious, how do you describe to people what this is? And do you also kind of subscribe to the "don't Google anything about it, just press play"?
Yeah, I found that not really giving it much going into it is the best way to do it. Although I've never asked anyone else to adhere to that, so it's surprising that other people are giving the same advice.
Are
But
you seeing that a lot on social media? That seems to be kind of like the line that people are saying.
it is, yeah, it's surprising. But yeah, people are just saying don't read about it, don't learn about it, just go watch it, which is wonderful, and how I would hope that people did it. But it's really just kind of surprising and interesting that people are coming to that naturally. Maybe because they don't know how to describe it, and they just know that that's easiest. But it's nice either way.
For sure. Well, it's interesting. One of the reasons I actually do tell people not to read up anything about it is because I don't want them to see the words, and I feel like this would come up a lot. I don't want to see them to see the words "magic show" because I don't think that those words appropriately fit what this is. And that's no slight to magic shows, but this feels like something else. It feels like a different animal. It feels a little bit deeper. Are you personally trying to steer clear of that categorization and trying to maybe like, that's one of the good reasons that I think it's nice that people aren't Googling, because I feel like that's an oversimplification.
That, yeah, I'm not afraid of that word, and or but I do feel like it does give maybe the wrong, I puts the wrong idea in people's heads because of just how we normally traditionally think of magic or magic shows and magicians. Whatever that conjures in your mind, I think it's not necessarily detrimental, but it's putting a frame around it that may not necessarily be right, and it's something that you'd have to wash away while you're watching, as opposed to just showing up and seeing it for what it is and letting it wash over you that way.
For sure, for sure. Oh, I am sort of curious just to kind of go back to the beginning as to where this idea initially came from. Like, what was the rock that kind of started rolling down the hill that eventually turned into the snowball?
Uh, I think it's there wasn't an initial seed other than I've been searching for who I am and as a person, as an artist, my entire life, just like most people. I think trying to figure out what it is I want to do in this world, and who I want to be, and instead of trying to go around it or avoid the question, I just tackled it head on with the skill sets that I have, and decided to make that the work, and instead of trying to make it separate from the work, I made it the project.
I gotta say, you are an unbelievable storyteller. Just as someone who just has that gift naturally. And as I'm watching this over the course of 90 minutes, I both want to tell you my deepest, darkest secrets, and then also don't trust you at the same time. So with that, I would say I would just want to ask this: the stories that you tell about going to into the bar and hearing the story about all the sort of different versions of that we hear throughout the show. Are they all true stories?
Yeah, yeah,
They
they
are.
are. They are. I understand why someone might be skeptical based on what they might know about me or think they know about me, or the context of it being a theater show and things like that. Yeah, but they're all true stories. I felt that was really important, especially when dealing with, like you said, bringing up magic or deception and these things. No, that's a part of the experience, obviously, but I knew that everything else had to have the integrity and authenticity um, that it required. So yeah, everything I say in there is true.
There is a truly incredible moment in the show where you send an audience member away with a book
Mm.
to write the ending themselves, and then they come back the next day. And you did 500 plus shows of this.
Yeah.
Was there ever a fear that they wouldn't come back with the book the next day?
Yeah, every day, every day. I genuinely didn't know if they would come back. I hoped that they would, and that was part of it. It was that belief in other people, and making them the other half of the show in such a way that was literal. Audiences are always the other half of the equation, whether they know it or not. And that's true for shows, I think, even when they're not they're not part of the dialogue, literally interacting with them. The audience is part of that experience, and they're the only reason that they're half of the reason that that live experience is happening. So I wanted to make it quite literal in that they carried the weight of the show with them, and put the show in their hands. And so that was a risk, and I knew I didn't feel good if it was theatrical or performative, in the sense that there were no contingency plans. There was no backup if it didn't work. If someone didn't come back, that would have to become part of the experience. And I knew that. I was not comfortable with it, but I knew that someone not coming back, if that happened, that would then become a part of the narrative somehow. And if that meant getting a new book and starting over or whatever, but belief that they would come back and feel that responsibility to do so was part of it. And luckily everyone did.
That's amazing. Well, to your point, sometimes you hear, performers say, "Oh, we had a bad audience the other night," or "Oh, they weren't super into it." And by nature of what this show was, you couldn't really have a bad audience. Like they had to be in this thing. They couldn't have an off night. I'm sort of curious as to, the trust that you had to have in your audience to go along for the ride. As much as we had to trust you, you also kind of had to trust that they were going to just sort of dive into this thing.
Yeah, I did. And some nights it wasn't great. There were nights where that trust worked against me in ways, or worked against the experience, because people didn't take it. Usually when people didn't take it seriously, they when there were people, or when people were looking for the spotlight and they wanted to take over the stage themselves and things like that, that's when it usually went south. But yeah, even when that happened, I asked for it. So there's nothing really I could do other than know that was what it was that day.
Do you still have the audience book of endings?
I do, yeah, I have the book. Yeah.
How often do you flip? I mean, that's such a great memento that's so tangible that kind of connects you. How often do you flip through that?
Almost never. I mean, I've started to recently because people have been asking about it, but I almost never look through it, because it's like looking through I don't know, an obituary or something. It's not for me, when it was out and it was when it was alive and in the world, is when it was important. And when it stopped, that's when it just became a record of what it used to be. So it's bittersweet that it's actually bittersweet that I have it. And I cherish it, but I also, I'd rather live the memory of experiencing it live than go back and look at it on the page.
That's fair. That's fair. And one more question about the audience. Whenever you're trying to focus on the show and do the best possible show you can possibly do, and all of a sudden you're looking into the eyes of Bill Gates, how do you I mean, because one of the things it shows at the end is that there are a lot of famous people came from from New York and came to see the show. How do you kind of keep focus, knowing, oh God, I'm gonna have to tell Bill Gates who he is?
I mean, that's just part of it. It would be a disservice to the show to treat them differently than I treated other people, because that's the point, is that we're all the same in a sense, even though we're different, and everyone is special and individuals and whatnot. So I couldn't really think about it that way. Sometimes it was nice when someone who we know for one thing may have chosen something, and how they see themselves differently than we perhaps see them. So that was always a nice surprise. But I did my best to just make sure that they were just like everyone else in the audience.
This thing has become such a word of mouth sensation over the past couple of weeks. I'm just sort of curious, how much do you credit that to sort of the times that we live in right now, in this world where people have different identities on social media versus who they are in real life? What does it say that a show about discovering who we are is striking a chord with people right now at this moment in time?
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a coincidence. I mean, it does seem like it is the question, is one of, if not the question of our time, of who are we, both individually and collectively, and understanding how we can see one another and what that means to see one another despite being so different. So yeah, it is a little fortuitous that it's part of the zeitgeist right now. And it actually, I didn't, I started the show in 2000, started working on it in 2015. started it in 2016, and the election happened.
Mhm.
And from then on, things changed, and the show that was just a show of me doing my things started to become something else, because it really was never about me. It was about it was about you. You just didn't know it. And so people started to come to it differently when when our country started to change and have this dialogue. And yeah, it became something else. And I feel like now's the only time it could have been released in a way.
I have to say though, I think forever one of my life regrets is going to be not seeing this live and not seeing it in New York. And I'm just sort of curious, I love what you guys and what Frank Oz did with the film. And there are obviously a lot of sort of added elements to it. But I'm sort of curious, what did I miss most by not getting the chance to see it live?
I'll be honest, the thing that you miss most is probably something that you may not have missed, in that there was a lot of tension in the theater, and a lot of discomfort, and you don't get that at home. The uncertainty, in a good way. Live theater is like the whole cat on a stage thing of like, what's it going to do, what's going to happen next, and anything could go wrong, and that's a tension that's inherent in live performance. But this particular show and the performance of it was very tense for people, and people were very on edge. And so yeah, there was a an uncertainty, and that excitement of live theater, which you can never replicate on film. But there was also some people who were genuinely uncomfortable, in the sense that when I start walking into the audience, you don't know what's gonna happen, and is he gonna like have me do something or say something, and that anxiety that is natural to experience sometimes causes people to miss what's being said, and it's harder to hear the words, or experience the language and the kind of the ideas in the show. And so I feel like the home version of it, if you will, is actually truer to the work, in a sense, because it doesn't allow you to experience those anxieties and maybe focus on the things that are important, rather than the theatricality of it. It's actually less theatrical on film, which is better, I think, in terms of you can just focus on the things that we want you to focus on, and not wonder like what's behind the curtain.
For sure. But focus being the key word, again, the emphasis, I love the emphasis on please put your phone away, because for 90 minutes, really you've got to be in this. And 90 minutes is not asking a lot of someone to put their phone away. And I'm glad that you kind of put that slate at the beginning of the film, because it really made me sort of go, oh, like this isn't something where I can be on Twitter and, be texting buddies at the same time. And I genuinely did silence my phone and put it down. Okay. I went, okay, he asked me. And I
That's
thought that
great
was
to
really
hear.
cool.
That's great to hear. Yeah.
I want to talk about working with Frank Oz, who it's so funny. I did not know directed this until the title card came up at the end. Which I love him, and I had the pleasure of geeking out with him at one of the Star Wars premieres.
Oh, nice.
And I geeked out hard, man. But I'm sort of curious, like in a way, this is your show, like this is your baby. No one knows it better than you. So I'm going to talk about the collaborative process of having him as a director. But in a way, are you kind of a silent co-director, or do you just have to hand over your baby to someone else and kind of let them run it?
No, yeah, Frank is very generous and collaborative, and he knew how important this work was to me, and so he very much you know allowed me to be a part of it in a way that is probably very untraditional. Also, he wasn't originally on. He was very supportive of the idea of turning it into a film, but he didn't really have a he didn't really know what that would look like at first, and so I started pushing it and kind of developing it, and it and eventually he got what I was saying and saw how it could be a film, and then the tables turned again, and I got to be basically at film school with Frank Oz for a year and a half, which is amazing, because he is one thing to work with him in the theater, where he's not a theater director. He wouldn't say that he has directed theater, but it's not his lane. And he was fine with that, working on this, because there was no lane for our show. It was just we were kind of stepping into a void and not really knowing what we were doing. But with film, he's it's like putting a race car driver behind, in a Formula One car. Like he he knows that world so well that it was really amazing to watch him dissect the work in a different way, and you know, together figuring out how to take this work that was alive on stage and putting it on film was a really great educational process for me.
And it just, oh my God, it floats so well. I love the moments where you sort of intercut different people's answers and show your different responses to different people. I love that because it also
Yeah.
showed that like it wasn't the same every night and you had to just sort of roll with it. I have sort of a weird hypothetical question. I love the opening story about you going to the bar, I believe in Spain,
Yep.
and the man telling you the story about you know, the guy who plays Russian roulette. And I'm sort of curious if you could have brought that man who told you that story to your show to see in and of itself. What do you think he would have? What do you think he would have said? How do you think he would have responded to a show like that?
It's a really good question. I sent the film to him, and I mean through a friend. I had the film sent to him, and he had a very emotional reaction to it, and it was really beautiful. He sent me a touching letter that was basically relieving me of you know, absolving me from the initial statement of you are the roulettista. He you know, he basically said you don't need to carry that burden anymore, and it was really a beautiful letter, and you know, arguably the greatest thing anyone could say about the show was from him, because it
That's
was
unbelievable. That's unbelievable. You're going to get me emotional in this interview. I can't handle any more emotions, man. And as we wrap up, just because, you know, I'm having such a hard time in the most complimentary sense possible, categorizing what this show is and categorizing what you do and who you are, it also makes it difficult for me to think about what your next step could be or what you could be doing. I know that you have the book coming out, and so I wanted to, you know, I want you to mention that, but also like where do you go from here? Because right now with the popularity of this, we're all sitting here going, okay, cool, what's next?
Yeah, well, you're right. It brings up an interesting dilemma because, you know, creating a show about not wanting to become one thing, I'm now the guy who made that show, and so I'm not sure yet entirely. I have the book. Obviously, I wrote that last year, and that's coming out in March, and so that's consuming a little bit of my time. But after that, you know, I'll just see where my heart takes me, and try to make something else, and try to accept all the nice things people are saying right now, but not think about them when I'm making the next thing.
For sure. Well, Derek, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to do this interview, man. All your entire team, everyone has been so kind to me, as and I've been blowing you up on social media and trying to get this, and I appreciate you taking the time to do it. And thank you to everyone who works with you, who was so kind to me and put up with all my insistent nagging on trying to hook up this interview, man. So I really, the piece really meant a lot to me and was very moving to me, and I just really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for having me, Jake. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Where we're going, we don't need roads.